Okay, hello everybody. This is the R-9 mid-cycle for Cinder for the Wallaby release. And the Etherpad is being shared, but you can also grab the link from the chat and follow along in your own Etherpad. Feel free to take notes, and we'll do the usual thing. I think we'll keep roughly to this order. We actually have a good bit of stuff to get through. So I guess we can get started. Okay, first, the business. Rajat's been handling the stable releases, and so he's got some stuff to say. So take it over, Rajat.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, so I've been tracking the stable branch patches on this Etherpad that I have mentioned in this Etherpad. I have mentioned the link to that, and the status currently is like Victoria had most of the patches merged, but there are new ones, so I've added them to the Etherpad. And Brian proposed some lower constraint fixes in stable branches that mostly have merged since last week. And like there is usually less review on the train and Usuri side, and that's all. And if you have any backport that I haven't mentioned in the tracker doc, then please let me know.
Brian, you're talking on mute.
Thank you. So
there you go.
Okay, yeah. So the what I was about to say was right. So as far as the shakeups in the requirements files from the lower constraint job and the pip resolver upgrade issue, I think we've got something merged to all the stable branches at this point for everything except cinderlib stable train is not working. So maybe we can talk about that later when Gork is here. There's some kind of weird thing, and I'm not quite sure how to go about it. So anyway, we've got something. So I stopped with the stable branches just because I kind of got sick of working on this. There's a patch to Cinder Stein that is working, and I think it may have merged by this point. So we may have to. So we'll have to see if that goes past Stein easily. And then, because I think all the gates are broken in all the stable branches that aren't releasable. So if you're interested in that, or if you have customers who are relying on, the maintenance of these extended maintenance branches, then I guess contact me so we can coordinate taking a look at that, because we'll probably need to get those going, or else nobody can merge anything. So that's all about that. And then, Rajat, we're saying 2 weeks to do the stable releases. So take a quick look through the Etherpad just in case there's anything missing that you're trying to backport, so we can keep an eye on it. Otherwise, if you're stable core, please use that Etherpad to do some reviews. Because hopefully we get the new drivers done, and that will open us up for reviewing everything else that's been stacking up. Okay, as far as the next item for business is the new drivers status. So we have a bunch of new drivers this cycle, which is nice. So we got 2 community drivers, the S3 backup and the Walt driver, the Ceph SCSI. The CI related patches for both of those. So both of those have community CI and they require DevStack support and some other stuff. So the CI related patches haven't all merged yet. Now we don't control some of those, but you may want to take a look at the DevStack one and slap a +1 on it just to get some action there. So I put a link. You can check out the patches from there. But everything, I'm pretty sure everything works. So we can run the CI on the dependencies, but of course we want to get everything merged. So that's good. And then as far as third-party drivers that have merged, we've got the OpenE Jovian DSS, which is iSCSI only, the Dell EMC Power Vault, which is iSCSI and Fiber Channel, and then 2U, I can't remember, I think that's iSCSI only, but maybe not. Anyway, those are merged, their CIs are running, so that's good. And then I sent out an email to the mailing list yesterday about the Kioxia driver. So that one, we had given it an extension. Both the patches have +2s. I only put a +1 on the brick patch because I would like somebody to I would like to get another eye, well, 2 eyes, but of one person on it. Would probably be the best arrangement. But so at the Cinder meeting, a couple people volunteered to look at the driver patch and the brick patch. So please, there's a link. I don't want to call out any names, but go look real quickly through the meeting log to see if you had volunteered. Please do it right away so we can get this out of the way. I believe they're in good shape, but we're not going to jam anything through. So if somebody finds something, we need to find it soon so there's enough time for it to be corrected. Zohar's been really good about being very quick to respond. The CI's running, so I'm feeling pretty good about these. So please, we just need to do our final part to get these through. And then what I'd like to do is, we missed the milestone 2 release. We don't have to release at milestones anymore. But what I would like to do is, as soon as we've got all the drivers merged, do a release. I don't know if anybody's going to actually test it carefully, but I would like everything there in one package. And then, it kind of makes a statement that we have merged our drivers. So anyway, I'm hoping nobody had an objection. I mean, I've proposed that we extend the new driver extension for Kioxia to Friday, and I'm taking it nobody had I didn't see anything on that mailing list objecting to that. Try to frame it right. It's always a bad precedent to let things slip. We'd really like to have all this stuff done by M2, but I think, anyway, my feeling is with this worldwide pandemic going on, I have nice intentions to do extra reviewing stuff over the weekend, but it doesn't happen. And I don't want to force anybody else to do it either. So the next time we have a worldwide pandemic, we can extend the driver deadlines also. Otherwise, M2 is our official position. Any comments or anything?
Please don't have another pandemic.
Yeah, I know. It'd be much better to review and get things over with. I agree. Okay, RBD iSCSI client news. So the Ceph iSCSI driver requires a small REST client to communicate between the driver and the Ceph. Ceph has like a API that allows you to do the exports to the initiator. So the Cinder project has taken that over. Walt graciously agreed to hand over the code to Cinder. So as I think I said, so anyway, all the governance patches have merged in project config. So you can find the code in OpenDev. Right now, all Cinder cores are RBD iSCSI cores. And I set it up so that we could add extra people if there's people. There are good Ceph people who would be good to have +2s on this. We can add them easily without messing anything up. I've got the patch up last night to reformat as a Cinder project, so it's standardized the documentation, moved some stuff around a little bit. updated the requirements so that the lower constraints could pass, and I forget what else. There's, oh yeah, set up the renode to do the release notes. So, and the docs published, well, to the if you go and look at the patch, the docs have published to, or the doc publishing job works and the release notes publishing job works, although it's empty because there aren't any release notes yet. So take a look at those, and I updated the Cinder docs to refer to the RBD iSCSI client. So in the list of stuff the Cinder project handles, that gets listed. Anything else? So that's basically it. So I think that's pretty much ready to go. I don't know if we need to do we should probably do a release. Well, I'll talk to Walt and we'll see what you think. I mean, so far there have been no actual code changes, really. Well, there's a change to the init file. I don't know if that matters, though. We may want to do a release just to make sure. So the one thing that is missing, actually, is the release file for this. Needs to go into the independent deliverables. Anyway, I'll follow up on that. Yeah, anyway, so that's the setup. And then last thing, there's a code removal patch that I would really like to see happen because it gets rid of a policy. And there's no sense having that hang around. So that's on line 49 in the Etherpad. So somebody please, it's got 1+2, it just needs another one. And it's, yeah, that's all I got to say about that. Okay, any comments, questions, or concerns? All right, let me slide down to the. Okay, so we got brainstorming on file system backend format info documentation. Whose topic was that? Hope I didn't put that on there.
It's my feature, but I also didn't put the topic. I don't remember putting it.
Well,
oh, I think I can
give thoughts on it. I don't know if there's some particular context.
I think. Yeah,
Well,
I think the question was what to do about the legacy volumes, because
yeah,
we don't have a migration for that proposed.
you do what we do now.
Right, but that doesn't work, or is it only in the?
Oh, it works. I mean, it's been usable for years. You just do what we do now. So what you do is for new volumes or whatever the trigger is that you want to store this metadata on format. I don't know if you want to try to detect it on existing volumes or just set this up on new volumes. I would recommend just setting it up on new volumes just to make it a clean thing to implement. But you just, on new volumes, record format fields. On existing volumes, you just leave it how it is now. And the result of that is that new volumes will never run into the one big bug that this will generate on existing volumes, which is that if you have NFS, if you have an NFS volume, you can write a QCal2 image into a raw volume and end up with something that doesn't attach correctly if you do that. But that's been that way for years, and it, doesn't seem to get many complaints or anything. So it's not great behavior, but we've mitigated all the security concerns around it, apparently successfully, as far as anyone can tell. And it just has a couple of weird things like that that can happen. But basically, adding this format info will fix it so that it all works correctly. And then for volumes that don't have this metadata, they'll just behave the way they do now, which most of the time works fine except for a couple of weird situations.
Okay, I guess it's all right. So as long as, so you think is a release note enough to, so I guess any operator who's come across this problem has figured out what to do about it, or maybe not. I don't know. I think it only really shows up if you're using, right, Cinder as a backend for Glance, and you also are using the NFS backend to store the images, and Glance is set up to allow QCOWs, which probably is
No, it's not. It's not if you Glance can have nothing to do with it. I mean, you can attach a volume to an instance and then stamp some QCOW2 thing onto it and get the same results. The thing I don't know, I haven't looked at this spec in a while, but one complication that I think was not solved in the spec for this is that if you want to do manage unmanage, you have to handle this field somehow. So if you want to manage one of these, you have to input the format with the manage operation. And I don't think that has been worked out in the spec for this.
Okay. All right, so
so in the spec that we merged, we have mentioned that for legacy volumes, we will be executing the QEMU info command and then determining the format and then store it into the admin metadata, something like that.
But you can't use QEMU. That's the whole problem. Because if you use QEMU image info to determine the format, it doesn't work if it's a raw volume because it's going to detect whatever you write inside of it. So you basically can't. The whole reason that this spec exists is because to handle files like this that can be different formats when you can have a raw file as a container, you have to always track with a piece of known metadata what the actual format is, because you can't detect the format since it can be raw, because you'll detect anything that anybody writes into it. And you don't know if the format was raw or if it's whatever they wrote into it, which is why you have to have like external information that tells you this.
Yeah, that's been fixed in the feature for new volumes, but for existing one, I wasn't sure like what we should do. Like this was the line that I wrote in the Etherpad to execute QEMU and then store the format in the admin metadata for legacy volumes. So
I think Eric's point is
I don't think
you can't reliably get the information we want. So it's probably better to just let the thing fail and crash and burn as it does now. Because otherwise we store inaccurate, format info. Fernando, you need to make sure you take a look at this because I think it probably impacts your backends.
So I had one doubt related to this. If we have a legacy volume and we clone it, then the same problem happens for that also. So we shouldn't touch that volume also, right?
I think trying to patch it up for existing volumes is just probably more work than it's worth.
Okay.
Okay, so the open question then is just how to handle the managing volumes. So it would have to be I guess we just need to make a provision for the admin to provide the information at the time of management.
There is probably some advice we could give to operators, which is that if you don't want to run into the known problems with the current system, there's an option that just says use qcal2 for your volumes instead of raw, and then you don't run into this problem where auto detection is tricked into thinking it's the wrong thing, because there's always a container. I think there is maybe, I don't remember. I want to say there might be 1 or 2 limitations around doing that, but I don't remember at this point what they might be.
Okay, any observations or anything? Rajat, did you get enough help on this, or?
Yeah, I think I have a good idea. Like this also depends on another patch of mine which fixes one bug. So
Okay.
I think that's all.
I'd say that I think there's some potential for this to also interact with NFS encryption work that we've done recently. I think they're basically orthogonal to each other, but it's just something to keep in the back of your head while looking at this. So if you use encrypted volumes on NFS, they will be qcal2 volumes, because that's how we do the encryption. So I don't think there's anything that directly impacts this, but it's definitely related enough to be at least aware of what's going on with encrypted volumes with this work too.
Okay.
All right, thanks, Eric. Okay, Rajat, you've got the next one also.
Yeah, so honestly, I haven't looked at it after I wrote. I'm just saying this now. So I think in our current code, when glance has raw images, then also we download that image, and then like we have image conversion directory, and that downloads that image into raw, and then we put it into the volume, so that waste access space. And there was a to do in the code to optimize this path. So I'm not sure what to say about this because I haven't looked at it much deeper. But
well, there is a good enhancement that we should look into here. Basically, if we're creating a volume from a glance image, and the glance image is a raw image, currently we write it to a temp file and then copy the temp file to the volume. We don't really need to do that if it's a raw glance image. We could just write it directly to the volume, which would be better in most ways. So I think that would be a good performance enhancement to do. I don't think anybody's really looked at it yet. There was one patch up a while ago that sounded similar to this, but what it was doing was trying to replace QEMU image convert with DD, but the mechanics of how much data was copied where was still the same. So it didn't really affect very much. But yeah, basically, if we're consuming a raw glance image, we could do a lot less I/O and shuffling around of data here.
Now, we would have to, so glance doesn't validate that the format that's recorded in the image metadata is the actual format of the image. So we would have to do a check at some point to make sure that what we wound up with was actually raw format and not some kind of other thing.
But you can't check for that. That's the whole thing that came up in the NFS discussion, because you don't know if it's raw. You could have anything inside of it. So you can't say, oh, there's a QCal2 header, it's not raw. Like, it could still be raw.
Well, but if it's a...
Because you don't know if someone has a raw volume that they uploaded to Glance and it just happened to have a QCal2 image inside of it, then that's what you're supposed to write. So if Glance says that it's raw, you have to just treat it as raw because there's nothing else you can do with it.
Okay, I'm just looking at the comment in the code, because right with the if it actually is a QCal and has a backing file.
Yeah, but we shouldn't be detecting the format based on QEMU image info here anyway. We should be doing it based on the metadata from the image, because we have that from Glance.
Yeah, but I don't know that you can rely on that because it's
Well, in the case where it's labeled as raw, you have to rely on it because there's no sane way to argue that it should be anything else. It's different if it was labeled QCal2 in Glance, and you can check to see if it's QCal2. But if it's labeled as raw, you have to just take it as raw because there's no other way to reason anything else you should do with it.
And Brian, one question: why are you saying that we cannot rely on Glance's metadata regarding this information?
Glance doesn't validate that the image data that's associated with the record has the same format that's mentioned in the metadata.
Yeah, but if it says it's raw, that's always a valid assessment of the format. Like there's nothing to validate.
Right, but I'm just thinking. Right.
I think raw is kind of, like Eric is saying, raw is a completely different field, like than anything else. Raw could be anything inside. So somebody says it's raw, or at least to treat it that way. That's what Glance should do. We should do. Nobody should touch that in any way. Like whatever you say.
So I'm just okay. I'm just wondering whether there's, right, could somebody put something else into Glance, right, and then we create a volume out of it that is somehow a security problem?
Well, the security problem comes from if you take a raw object and then you try to interpret it as something else.
Mm-hmm.
And the real security concern that everybody's talking about with this is backing files for QCal2 headers is the main one. But that's why if you have something that's raw, you have to just have a flag everywhere that says this thing is raw and then never try to detect anything on it. Because people could write whatever they want into it.
Okay. All right. Any questions or comments about that?
So I think RPD currently does it already if the Glance and Cinder backend are RPD, but not further backends.
one of the reasons that this whole area is of interest, we've had all these customer cases related to Cinder using temp space for copying images onto volumes, because if you're using large images and you didn't account for that, you can end up filling up local disks. So that's one aspect of why this topic was of interest, just less temp space usage. I've got another work in progress patch up along similar lines to try to help with that I need to follow up on. It tries to make it so that when we do write temp files, we at least write them with sparseness instead of full fat zeros when possible. I have a proof of concept that I think works. I just need to tune up the code a little bit because I don't really like it, but I think the idea works. We're also still very interested if anybody wants to take a look at making Cinder a little bit smarter about, oh, I'm about to download a 20 gig glance image and I've only got 5 gigs of disk space, and trying to handle situations like that more smoothly. Because right now Cinder tends to just fill the disk up in that kind of situation. So I'm going to be kind of poking at this slowly in the background on a few different fronts, but it's an area that could use some improvement if anybody's interested in it.
All right, thanks, Eric. Anything else on that one? Okay. Next thing, there's been some stuff on the mailing list about this ospurge command, and I think it's been implemented in openstacksdk. There's a patch up that would put it into openstackclient, and the question is just, does it actually do? It's not a thorough purge, I don't think, and we should probably give some feedback on this.
So this is a purge operation that you tell it to purge a project. Is that the idea?
Right. It's yeah, I think it's that mailing list. Yeah, I think the idea is, yeah, you just do OpenStack project purge, and then it's supposed to remove all traces of that project and all the stuff it owns from throughout your cloud.
So is it supposed to like delete your volumes and snapshots and stuff?
Yeah.
And I assume it would also delete quotas, which is something that we leave currently because there is no connection between Keystone and Cinder, right?
Right. So actually, if you look at the SDK link that's on the Etherpad, I'll put it in the chat also. Right, that's the actual code that's doing the Cinder purge, and it does not touch quotas.
Doesn't touch things like volume transfers either.
No, and it doesn't detect like if there's a private volume type and this is the only project using it. I mean, maybe that's a little overkill, but that's another thing that could be. So it looks like the right off the top, quotas would need to. Where's the?
Yeah, quotas definitely, because I've heard customers complaining about that.
I'll have to do groups too.
So we got quotas, groups. There was one other one already mentioned. I forgot.
Transfers.
Transfers, right?
I'm sure there are others as well.
And one thing, this is a old code, right? This is meant to work for all their in their releases, not just for the current one. I'm asking because Eric already added a feature where you can ask delete this volume and all the snapshots. So it could be more efficient if this only needs to work with master and not be backward compatible. We wouldn't query for the snapshots because that's sorry.
That feature's in quite a few releases at this point. That was a while ago.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
Right.
delete.
Which feature is that?
Cascade delete for volume.
Oh, right.
So that is a nice feature that means that if you have a lot of snapshots and volumes and everything, you don't have to go one by one looking at the snapshots. You just go by volume, delete them, you're good to go.
Okay, that's a good point. It may run into micro version support.
I mean,
well, that's something for them to worry about. They've got to do that anyway,
true.
right? Or somebody does.
True. That's why this needs to be kept because they don't support micro versions. Okay, forgot about that.
they're adding this to openstackclient, which doesn't yet support microversions for Cinder.
Well, but the client command is supposed to use this SDK code, which is then supposed to contact Cinder. So the SDK may, I don't know. So this is another question to ask about.
They did group snapshots too.
Group snapshots, right?
Is this thing like, I mean, is it assuming that you've already gotten rid of your instances so nothing is attached, or like?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask about the attachments.
If you just write a loop that says go delete all the volumes, it's going to fail for like 13 different reasons depending on what you're actually doing. So, I mean, you kind of have to sequence things, and you can't just say delete it all and like not do anything else.
Yeah, I haven't looked closely.
Are they purging first Nova, or because if they are,
I would hope
then,
so. Yeah, because that would make sense to get rid of all the instances first.
Yeah, and that could take care of our attachments in at least some of them. But what would happen is if they delete an instance, the touching fails. On the Nova side, Nova would delete the instance, and like Eric was saying, our volume would still have an attachment, so deletion would fail. So we need to check attachments and clean them up. Yep.
We also get into cross-service stuff where if you're using Cinder as a backend for Glance and you say go delete all the Cinder stuff, what happens on the Glance side? Like, I'm not sure how smart this tool is trying to be about stuff like that.
Eric, regarding that question, doesn't Glance use a special user or something?
I don't know, but you could still run purge against whatever user Glance is using.
Yeah, what I mean is that if they are going to purge also the images in Glance, then that would take care of the volumes, right?
Yeah, as long as it did it in the right order. But yeah.
Okay, well that gives
I would also wonder about what the right thing is even to do with backups. If the answer, if you want to say purge a project, do you actually always want to throw away all the backups, or do you sometimes want to take them and hand them to the admin instead? I mean, it kind of depends on what kind of situation you're in with purging stuff.
I would think that you want them deleted. It's everything a project owns should go. And if you don't want it to go, take care of it before, right? It doesn't, backups are just part of that project. So if I'm a public cloud
totally get
user,
technically, there's no argument on the technical aspect. I get that. It's just a question of what the use case actually is. I mean, yeah, we can just say if it's that project, delete it. That's fine. But it depends on what people are using this tool for, and I don't know why anyone wants this tool, so I'm not really sure what to make of it use case wise.
well, I can think of one case. If I have a public cloud and somebody doesn't want to work anymore, closes their account, I want to purge everything from that one, right? So you purge the project, boom, done.
Yep.
That's the only case I can think of.
yeah. So the use case from the email is just what's the right approach to clean up all resources of a project in order for it to be deleted.
What does this do with, like, doesn't Glance have like public and shared images? Like, what does it do for stuff like that?
I do not know.
Glance's problem.
But yeah, I mean,
I just don't want to. I'm just hoping we don't make a tool that's really good at one particular use case and turns out to not be the use case that most people actually care about.
right. Let me record that
People
concern.
can make whatever they want to make, I guess.
Right. All right. So maybe my point in putting this on here is that, you know, we don't, well, me anyway, I don't cooperate well with the OpenstackClient or OpenstackSDK communities. I mean, we do our stuff and then expect them to sort of keep up, or at least that's always been my expectation. So I was trying to give them some feedback since they're, they've got this command that's supposed to clean stuff up. We can point to them saying, well, there's some other things you should look at too. But the more we look, the harder this seems to get.
No, that's useful.
Yeah.
I will take this as an opportunity to ask, since I don't think it was on the agenda anywhere. Are we ever going to get OpenstackClient micro versions for Cinder or what? Does anybody know? Like, we've been sitting around for like 5 years trying to figure out how this work's going to happen.
No. I mean, what I mean by saying no is that no, I do not know what the state of their microversion support is. So they claim they support microversions, but apparently not.
Yeah, they support microversions, but you can't use them with Cinder, so I don't care.
Okay. So I don't know if that's still the case or not. Does anyone here? So here's an opportunity. So my hero of Cinder thing did not work last time because we have no heroes. So if somebody would like to be a Wallaby hero of Cinder, that would be something to look into. Because we do have a spreadsheet that Sean put up, but it's like 4 or 5 cycles old at this point of the gaps, and I don't know how many of them have been closed, but also we've added a bunch more gaps between our client and the OpenStack client. So there's an opportunity to update that thing, although probably the thing to do is to look into this microversion question. And I don't know, is anyone here interested in OpenStack client cooperation type stuff? I mean, maybe this is a Google Summer of Code thing. So that I forgot to put this on the agenda. We can apply as OpenStack to have a project for someone to work on, get paid by Google to work on for Google Summer of Code. I haven't put anything together for that, but I probably should just in case. So maybe this is a kind of thing that a motivated person could just do in the summer.
I think this could be kind of a poison gift if you give it to somebody because it's going to be kind of messy. It's not just going into one project and fixing something or implementing a feature. This is problematic. They have to figure out everything, talk with them, talk with us. Well,
yeah, there's a lot of negotiation type stuff that would slow down work. You're right. All right.
And it would probably frustrate anybody that goes to that kind of. Yeah.
Okay, so it's probably Summer of Code is not a good idea for this. Okay, so let me just put, all right, so opportunity.
For Summer of Code, there are, for example, Eric mentioned earlier, the feature to be smarter about how much available space is when you're downloading an image. That is something useful. It may be not the whole thing that they have to do, but one of the things they could work on could be that one. That's meaningful and not a big thing.
All right, that's a good idea. Thanks for mentioning that. All right, I'll see if I can slap something together. The deadline is like February 19th. I just noticed that Manila always has a bunch of people doing stuff, so I want to try to get in on that action. Okay.
But Brian, you do know that it takes more time to work with them than actually to do it yourself, right? I mean,
I know that's
okay.
That's why I'm not that really.
I mean, it's a good thing.
That's why I haven't done anything earlier, because I just don't know what to. Yeah. Okay. So here's another opportunity to be a hero of Cinder. If you would like to take on a Google Summer of Code person and guide them through this activity, or maybe we could all split it up as a team. I don't know. All right, let me the 19th. All right, I'll see if I can come up with something before the next Cinder meeting. Because if it's like a group thing where we need like 3 or 4 people to cooperate to like mentor this person, to get them up and running and do stuff, I will have to get people to sign on to that. Okay. All right. That's good. All right, anything else about ospurge? So the summary is this doesn't do enough. We're not sure what it really wants to do. There's plenty of room for work here. And there we go. And we still don't know if OpenStack clients can support our kind of microversions. Yeah, I believe the TC approved a stance toward the OpenStack client that everybody should use it without dictating a timeline or anything. And if you can't use it, you're supposed to file a bug or something. But that's the current status of that, I think.
I think if you want to use numerous Cinder features, you can't use it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And okay, any other general comments or observations? So ask around people who may not have attended today if there's anyone you know who's interested in user interface type stuff and might be interested in, working with the OpenStack client team to get some kind of coherent way forward so that we don't have to support dueling clients. Here we go.
Well, let me recap a summary from my recollection. I mean, I've already touched that electric fence once, so I'm a little shy. But basically, there was an old patch that wanted to add microversion support to the OpenStack client that was rejected. And the trend seems to be, oh, well, we don't want the OpenStack client to use Cinder client at all. We want to shift everything to OpenSDK. And everything sort of stopped there. So my sense is that the only way to get the OpenStack shell command to work is for us to go off and completely understand OpenStack SDK to see how it's aligned with current Cinder features.
No, and that's the thing.
So it's like a huge, right out of the gate, brick wall to run into.
Right. And the other thing about the OpenStack SDK, I still have not gotten a coherent answer about this, right? It was supposed to be an opinionated, well, I went and looked this up. It's supposed to have two sections. One's supposed to do everything via API calls, and the other is supposed to give you the core things that most people would want to do. So it's opinionated, but it's supposed to also be able to do everything. But I don't know.
Can it create a volume without a name?
Yeah, please.
Right. Well, so they're right. The opinion is that that's silly. But what can you do? All right. Yeah, because right, the SDK is supposed to use. I don't know. So we're in the situation, right? Our API is published. We know it works. If somebody wants to implement everything in another client using only the API, they can do it. We're not going to stop them. Anyway, I just have a problem with us, unless there's somebody really interested in doing this. I like the Python Cinder client because we know it works. We've got tests, and it keeps up with the features. All right. Anyway, enough of that. Okay, so this was my attempt to try to cross bridges, and it looks like I don't know. All right, I'll try to write this up and then contact whoever it is who's doing the ospurge stuff and just point out that we have some issues. Okay, thank you for listening to that rant. Okay, next topic is Eric about refactoring the cinder.utils.
Yeah, I don't know if there's really much reason to do too much discussion on this since I did talk about it last week at the IRC meeting, I think. I'll just recap that basically everything in Cinder imports cinder.utils, which imports ospurge and all kinds of stuff. And the result of this is that commands like cinder manage dbsync depend on ospurge, which is just bad style and just a mess. So I split things up where stuff that's only used by the volume service goes into volume utils instead of cinder.utils. And that's about it. I mean, it's just moving code to where it should be so that we don't have a bunch of needless coupling between libraries, and we don't have the API service loading ospurge and stuff that's totally not needed there. So I don't know what to say other than I hope that makes sense and review it. I can answer questions if anyone has any questions, but I think it's
Yeah, I don't know if the Kioxia driver, so we should, what I'd like to do is let's get all the drivers done. Then we need to do a quick check to make, well, I guess our unit test would catch this, right? If any of the drivers.
Well, I thought that unit tests would catch any problems, but there was one driver in here that I missed and unit tests passed and it would have been broken. So unit tests catch most of the stuff, but I think I didn't really get into why. I mean, they're decorators that are used in a particular way, and there was one driver that the unit test just worked even though it was clearly wrong. But I think unit tests will work for most of this change. And if not, that's why we should just merge it now so that we can fix stuff instead of waiting till the end of the cycle and then getting afraid to merge it and then putting it off to the next cycle and then staring at it. And then we go have this meeting again months from now.
All right. Yeah, I agree with your sentiment there. Okay, so in reviewing, we just need to take a quick look and make sure if any of the new drivers, luckily there's not many of them, are using cinder.utils. Just make sure that they're now using volume utils to get the right stuff. That's good. Okay. So I think the position, I think this was at the meeting too. We all think this is a good idea.
Yeah, and patches shouldn't be too hard to review.
Right.
So I'll try to have a look after the meeting.
Okay. Thanks. All right, next thing, the block storage API. Is it on here? Yeah, all right, I don't mean to put them on the spot. Okay, so we would like to remove the block storage API v2 this cycle. Yvonne, do you have any status report?
Unfortunately, no. It didn't work on the same. I'm sorry, guys. I'll try to provide some update next meeting.
Okay, that's good. And we'll see. I'm going to put up a patch to remove it from the Cinder client, and then we'll see. Then that way, it sort of committed us to, on the road to getting rid of this. So let's see. Anyway, so yeah, let's talk about it at the next meeting. So I will down. I'm just hoping that. I've been scared to get started on this because I'm afraid what's going to happen when I remove it in terms of we've got, right, our V3 classes rely on the V2 classes. So in terms of like keeping the tests accurate, I can't just remove all the V2 tests, basically, because we're going to still, our V3 code is still using V2 classes. I'm hoping there's a nice decoupling. I'm thinking what I need to do, sorry, I'm just thinking out loud. I've been meaning to do this, but haven't. I want to run code coverage on it and save that, and then remove what looks appropriate, and then redo the code coverage to see what happens when I get rid of all the V2 tests. I'm afraid it's going to leave a bunch of V3 stuff uncovered, but maybe not. I don't know. All right, but I will get something up, and then but I think well, let's see how bad the patch gets. I think if we can prioritize getting it out of the Cinder client, that makes a big statement. I mean, I've warned everybody back in October, I think, was it October, November or something, that this was coming. There would be no V2 client support. So I think we definitely should remove that, and then that will make it easier to get rid of the V2 API, because people should just completely stop using it. But we'll see. Okay. Any comments or observations? Okay. All right, and then somehow I managed to miss this at the last meeting. Right, so Gorka sent an email to the list, so I resent it and said we would discuss it. So if you open that link, you can see what the proposal is. But Gorka, you can tell us real quickly.
Yeah, probably better. So the topic is about backups, and specifically the optional parameter called container, which means different things depending on the driver. So in the email I mentioned, for example, for Google Cloud and for the S3 drivers, this means a bucket. For Swift, it's container, which is basically the same thing. Then for Ceph, it is a pool, a completely different pool. And for NFS and POSIX, it's a directory. So one of the things that currently happens is that some administrators may want to limit who has access to this feature, to who can actually change the location where your backups are going. Maybe for a directory in NFS, it's not a big deal. If a user changes it, whatever, not a problem, because then everything is indexed, is subdivided by directories based on a hash, or if I remember correctly, and then the UUID is used, which is unique, so it doesn't really matter. But for things like Ceph, where they are changing the pool, this is a bigger deal. I mean, because it's a completely different pool, which could be going to different disk and everything. And currently, the only way they have to prevent them, for example, from going somewhere they shouldn't. So if I'm going with the Ceph use case. If I'm a user and I say, write my backup into the volumes container, the only way I can, as an administrator, limit that, prevent them from writing to the actual volumes pool, is by using different Ceph users with different credentials for the volume service and the backup service. But if I use the same one, I cannot prevent it. Even when I use a different one, that gets, as an administrator, that gets the feature that I want, which is they cannot write anywhere else. But as a user, this is terrible because I say write it to some other container and it just fails. Backup goes into error, and I have no idea why it's going into error. Then again, this also means that you have an all or nothing approach where nobody can write anywhere else. But maybe you want some of your users to actually be able to do it as an administrator. You may want to write to a different replicated backup pool, like that. So my idea was to change this by implementing two things. One is pretty straightforward, which is basically adding a policy regarding the container parameter. So you can limit who has access, who can get it, and who cannot. And the other one is adding regex to the backup part, so it can be limited. The option can be limited. So instead of being able to write whatever you want in there, you can say, okay, you can select backups, you can select replicated backups or whatever. So I don't know if people think that I assume that the policy thing is not a big deal. I mean, it's just one more policy. We have 1,000. What's one more? But probably the regex, it's a little more controversial. But that having the regex also means that we could make the API fail immediately, fail fast, if somebody writes something that they shouldn't in the parameter.
So that's okay. Yeah, because we can fail fast, because the problem is there's no way to discover the regex. But if the cloud operator documents it and it fails fast, then the person would know, right, I'm failing because this is an illegal container. I should go ask what are legal container names or something.
Mm-hmm. And we could always return the regex in there.
Oh, and say it must match.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, but of course, you only return this error if you have passed the policy. So you must be allowed to set the field, and if you're allowed to set the field, then you get to see what are the regex. That way, you have meaningful information on what you can set, while not exposing to users that shouldn't be able to say it. So I don't know if anybody thinks this is basically, if anybody has anything against it or any other ideas that could be better, or if anybody cares at all.
No, I think, I mean, it's a definite pain point on both, like you pointed out in your email, both for users and for operators. This is a really bad experience. So I think we should do something. And the other thing I was going to say was we can add this policy if you go and review Rajat's thing that removes that other policy. So I'll trade you. And then
which policy?
There's if you scroll near the, let me find it. Rajat's got a patch up that removes a policy. So here, I'll put it in the chat.
Does it? Are you talking about the nested code driver?
Oh yeah, yep, I remember that one.
So you can have that. So there'll be a net zero policy edition.
That's
so
good.
I'm okay with that. Yeah, Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense.
Yeah, by default, the default values, you leave it as it is, the backward compatible. Anybody can make the changes, and the regex is basically anything goes.
Mhm.
So. Okay, if
Yeah.
nobody is against it, I'm good.
Okay. Good. Okay. All right. Oh, I'm up next. Oh, so I put. All right. Sorry. I just noticed I put notes in the wrong place. All right. So there's an initiative going on to try to make the policies more consistent across services using some of the stuff that's been added to Keystone in Queens or Rocky. So I've been looking at that. Red Hat has a initiative that to try to push this. Basically what's happened is because of the way our URLs are designed and having a project ID in the URL, there's a problem with using scoped tokens because a system, I don't know if I'm, let me back up. So anyway, there's.
Yeah, you were saying it right.
Yeah, I know,
System
but
scope.
I don't know if everybody knows about. So basically what's happened is that the old way of doing stuff in OpenStack was that you have roles, and then based on your role, we would detect permissions, and the policies would be written in terms of that. Now what's happened is that wasn't really rich enough to do much. Well, that's not quite true. You can do a lot with that, but it gets really complicated really fast, and it gets to be tricky to configure, and it's very easy to get stuff wrong. So that would make things less secure, even though you're trying to tie things down. So what Keystone did was go from just having roles to having roles and having scopes. And so you have a role, but your token allows you to operate within a particular scope. So there are two things that can be checked by the policy engine to see what you're allowed to do. So to make this less abstract and easier to use, Keystone out of the box will give you 3 basic roles and 3 basic scopes. And so when you combine these together, you get 9 different personas of what kinds of users you can have. And then the idea is once we've got these personas, then we can define our policies in terms of that and make everything work really great. Anyway, with system scope, you're not really tied to a project. So, I don't know. The old way of looking at this was that everybody was tied to a project because you have to have a role on a project. But once you add these different methods of scoping, that's not true anymore. And it becomes a problem because in the service catalog, the way it's structured, if to generate the URLs to use Cinder, you need to have a project ID. But if you get one of these tokens that doesn't have a project ID associated with it, like a system scope token, then there's no way to generate the correct endpoints to use Cinder. And so we're stuck with this problem. I'll try to be more coherent about this. But basically what it comes down to is because of Cinder, we can really only still work with project level scope at this point. So I just have to talk about this at the next Cinder meeting. I've got a patch up for a big matrix that looks at all our policies with the personas we want to implement. It's going to include the stuff that we can't do yet because we need to get a sense of what kind of changes we're going to have to make. But at this point, I'm not sure what my point is.
Brian,
Yes.
I think maybe what we need to discuss is, for example, if we think that Nova's approach to changing the URLs can be included as a microversion, like they did. For example, what Nova did was they added a microversion where all the URLs that were getting the project ID from the URL itself move that information away from it. So if you call with this microversion, the URL is no longer that one, remove the project from there, include it in the body or somewhere else. So my thinking was, if we change every single URL, maybe calling it a microversion is not really the right idea. It's not micro, it's 100 URLs that we're changing. But then again, it's not the end of the world if we actually do it. So I don't know if people are okay with doing it in a microversion or if we have to look at other possible approaches, right?
Yeah, so my thought about that is we need a spec and we need to do it next cycle. Because the problem is, right, the Keystone generating the service catalog.
But I think you could have both catalogs entries. I think somebody replied to me saying that Nova did it. They had both simultaneously, and it was fine. So in the email, I think there was a link or something, but that they or the microversion where they did it or something. But we could look at how Nova did it. So it should be possible if they did it.
Right.
And we even have some guidance from their implementation.
Yeah, so there's yeah, I mean, my feeling is it's too late in the cycle to do that in Wallaby.
I would have to say it depends on what it entails, because in my head, this is something that probably can be done with a simple decorator in all our APIs or something like that, like support both, and if it's this microversion, go here and get the project ID, else it's from here or something like that. I don't know how that could work.
Well, I think so. Yeah. I'm thinking I'd rather get rid of V2 first and then implement this, in terms of priority. Now, I imagine you can have them coexist.
Yeah, but this would block the RBAC feature to support system-wide, right? System scopes, right? So,
Yeah, but I think it's been revised, so it's just project scope at this point anyway is acceptable.
okay.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody has a strong opinion on this. Probably not. I mean, it's basically Red Hat's kind of driving this effort. So I don't know that anybody else has much interest at this point.
Well, I think this is a pretty nice feature. Once it's done, it's going to be really nice. This
Right.
plus the auditor stuff and everything, this is going to make, from an operator perspective, it is going to make their life a lot easier. This is kind of this is the kind of feature that you expect in an enterprise product. So I think this is,
Right.
yeah. So this is really good one. But one thing that I am trying to remember is, we discussed this earlier, but we had some code in Cinder where a reader in a project was able to see information they shouldn't be able to, right? If I remember correctly. Things like pool information or like that in the backends.
I don't think so. So the project reader can't see any more than a regular user at this point can see.
Not even, okay.
Right, because the current member of a project, ignoring all this other stuff, can't see any of that. So the project reader can't see any either. And then on the system reader side, it's okay for them to see that stuff. Because the thing, because the thing you don't want them to see would be, Cinder doesn't have any, the admin reader kind of guy can see information about the system, like the pools and stuff, because that's what you do. What they can't see would be, right, so if you take the Keystone analogy, right, what they can't see are like the individual person's passwords and stuff. But we don't have any of that kind of sensitive user-focused information in Cinder. So that doesn't really matter at this point, but that was the understanding I got from Lance looking again. So it doesn't seem like we have the kind of information in Cinder that the system reader, so the system reader has to be able to read system kind of information, just not personal sensitive stuff.
But for example, should they be allowed to the project reader, in any reader, in my opinion, should not be able to see the authentication stuff in the attachments, for example?
Well, that's
because then a reader have no. Yeah, well, because it's in theory, if you have a password in there to access the volume, I don't think it should be exposed to a reader.
But it's got to be exposed to the member.
No, to a member, but not to a reader. That's what one of the emails I asked in the latest email, and he rephrased it to make it clear that a reader usually can have, and in many cases will have, less visibility to data than a member. A member will be able to see things of himself or herself, such as passwords and things like that, that a reader should not.
We'll have to, yeah. So
I'm not really too concerned. Maybe I'm just being too theoretical about this. In theory, this would work. I don't know if it has any practical implications, security-wise, to be able to see that information. In theory, it's not like you can use that information for anything, because you cannot do attachments or anything, but
yeah, I don't know. All right, so I'll put up the, we'll have to discuss this on the matrix of how we expect these things to behave. Because we don't have an easy way to remove that, I don't think. Anyway, yeah, we'll have to think some more. I don't know. I mean, my feeling is you don't want the reader to be so useless that they, you know.
No, this is only about exposing things like passwords and things like that. It's not about restricting every single thing that they can see. Of course, they can see the metadata in the volume, but should they see the admin metadata from the volume? For example, I would say no.
But
They are
right, and nobody at the project level can see the admin metadata, right? So
as
that
a
makes,
reader. That's cool.
well, even
But
as
the system,
well, the system, I think probably yes.
that's where I'm getting at. They should not be able to see it. It's admin. It's not. That's not their scope. They are not admins. They are readers.
The system reader is
It's not an admin. It's a reader.
right, but what is it that they are reading?
Well,
The same thing as the project.
as somebody that's not been directly involved in this effort, this exact kind of question is what puzzles me about this whole thing. Is we have these roles, but it's not clear that we know what a system reader can, like, just conceptually, what is that?
Yeah. Okay, let me put it this way. A reader can see sensitive information. That's what they can see. So a reader, since it cannot see sensitive information, it cannot see admin metadata, ever. That's the thing. I don't care the scope. So this is what they can do. They can see information that is not sensitive. Now, you get on the other dimension, which is the scope. The scope just means that I can do that same thing, same things that are not sensitive, into different resources. So if I'm a user, I can see my things. If I'm a project, I can see all from the project. If I'm in a system, I can see all the projects, all the resources in all the projects, but I can still do the same thing, which is read. That's my access level, read. It doesn't matter if I can do one thing, 1,000, I can do the same thing, just in more resources. So I'm a system reader for Eric's project. I can see exactly as a reader the same things that Eric can see as a project reader. Because that's the scope. It changes the scope, not the things that I can see or do.
I don't know. I'm thinking that's more like a domain reader.
That has been discussed and it has been agreed over and over, like 4 times now. This has been agreed that these are 2 different dimensions. Reader is not that. The reader doesn't matter at what scope you're talking about, you're doing it. You can do the same things, regardless of the scope. So that's why a normal user cannot see admin metadata. The reader cannot see it. When you go to a project, it cannot see it either. And when you go to a system, it can do the same thing and see the same amount of data. So it cannot see admin metadata because it can see the same thing as the project, the same amount of information. So that is my concern, that maybe we are not implementing it correctly. We are mixing things.
Luckily, we're not doing it at all yet, so.
Oh, then we're good. We can keep on discussing this. That's fine.
Yes, I talked to Lance about this, and I thought we had.
I asked him specifically in the latest email thread because he did a TLDR section, which said exactly what you were saying.
Right.
Whereas the rest of the email, if you read it, the long version, it said the opposite. So I went in and said, hey, these are opposite. Which one is the right one? And he rephrased it, the TLDR, to say what I'm saying now.
So
a reader should not show sensitive information.
Right,
ever.
But what counts as sensitive information?
Admin metadata, because it has the admin word before it.
We have to go through and map out all our fields and figure out what is sensitive information, basically.
Yeah, let me, but I asked, I gotta I've got to go back and look at my notes. Because I asked him again about this. Does the, having the reader role limit you across all scopes? And he said no. But now I'm losing track of that again.
I don't know. But that I asked one specifically, and he was clear.
Yeah, maybe I just
So,
wasn't paying attention. Let me,
well, I think this also comes from the initial idea that we all had, because I thought like you are thinking right now. It's like, yeah, if I'm at the system level, it's like I'm an admin. I can do anything. It's just that I cannot do things, but I can see everything because I'm at the system level. But then they explain the whole scope plus the other one. It's like, no, two different dimensions. So, yeah. Anyway,
yeah.
I think this is kind of important, but probably not critical.
Well, yeah.
I mean, for what we have, for the kind of information we have, probably non-critical. But still, it could be nice to do it right.
Yeah.
How much more time do we have here today?
Like 20 minutes. So yeah, we should move on. All right. So anyway, I'll give us an update on that. And thanks. Okay, Eric, mypy.
Yeah, I'm working on mypy. I'm adding type annotations to make our code better and prevent bugs. Been going since like September. We haven't merged any of it. We should probably do that. I don't really know.
Are you reading off the script, Eric?
No, I just seriously though, like, what is it going to take to get people to merge some of these changes? I really need to know, because I think it's useful stuff, and the pile of patches is just getting bigger and bigger, and none of it is merging, and it's not really clear what the plan is here.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, our official position is that we encourage this and agree that this is a great idea, but we have to get in and review. I don't know. At one point, we'd sort of agreed that every person should adopt one of Eric's patches and, work on it. Should we stick with that plan, but like actually make a list right now? Would that help? I mean, it would kind of help me if if I'm just responsible for one of them. But I guess the other thing was, we need 2 plus 2s. Right? I don't know. I know Rajat's been doing some reviews. Helen Walsh was reviewing stuff at one point.
Yeah, Rajat's been on the volume manager one, which is the first one that I was trying to land in this whole series of stuff. So I don't know. I can go into my usual spiel about how, this whole scheme only really works once you hit a high enough threshold of coverage for a bunch of different parts of our code to be annotated and interact with each other. But the nice part about reviewing this stuff is that since 99% of it is annotations and not any runtime changes, if the annotation part is somehow wrong, it's kind of a self-proving system, and it will eventually get found and fixed, because the whole way that this works is that everybody annotates types that they're passing from where they are to a method they're calling and what it returns. And if they don't match because you messed up, then you either have a bug or you've annotated stuff wrong and you can just fix it. And my point in saying this is that, like, if you review the thing and it looks sensible, the notion that you might miss some detail where one bit of, one of the 500 annotations is wrong doesn't really end up being like a fatal error. It just is something that we eventually will notice and clean up. It's not going to like break the cinder service. And I mention this because I'm not sure if people are just hesitant because they're worried about something going wrong or what, but there's not a whole lot of stuff that's going to go wrong with this kind of work.
Okay, I dug this up. So we did actually discuss this at a meeting. So let's look at this. So Walt was going to do the driver.py. Rajat was doing volume manager. I'm supposed to do the volume utils. Lucio was going to do remote FS. Gorka was doing LVM. And I was doing API.py. So I guess that's just a reminder to us to like do it. Okay.
So I think the long story short here is that they are low risk changes that have value add, and we just need people to look at them and give them a +2.
I think that's right.
Okay.
All right. Well, I'll commit. Well, I've got two things. So with the moving the volume utils around, has that messed up the?
Yeah, it's all going to conflict with stuff, but
Okay.
if something merges, I will update the other part.
I know, Eric. I know this is horribly frustrating.
Don't care. Just land anything, and I'll just fix all the conflicts.
All right. So let's as far as prioritizing this, should we do the split the utils up first and then do this, or would you rather do the other direction?
Probably, just because it would probably be, there's more useful short-term impact on the utils split stuff, and it'd probably be easier to resolve it that way.
Okay. All right, then all right. So I'll commit to reviewing the API.py mypy changes and the util split that's up. So I'll do that today. And then I want to split off, remove the V2 Cinder client. Okay, thank you, Eric, for bringing that to our attention. Any questions? All right, so everybody please review the stuff you've committed to, because that would be, what meeting was this? Oh man, November 18th. Okay, so we're a few months behind. Okay.
I'll try to take a look through things too.
All right, thanks. Okay, so test with current versions of Ceph. Eric was.
Yeah, so we talked not too long ago about minimum version of Ceph. And I think we decided we want to state we support at least Mimic and forward. We really need to test with at least current versions of Ceph each cycle. We basically, as far as upstream gate stuff, I think we just skipped Octopus altogether. Pacific is out now. It doesn't work. We still have changes we need to make in Cinder. I fixed one bug. There's at least one more that's preventing it from actually working. So there's some test patches up on DevStack plugin Ceph that currently are running CI jobs against Pacific that shake out some of this stuff. But basically, I think what we need to do is come up with some kind of way so that each cycle we say, okay, the current newest version of Ceph is this. Let's make sure we have some kind of job that runs against it and figure out how to make sure we're supporting what we should support, which presumably every cycle of Cinder, we should support the most recently released version of Ceph, I guess, or at least test against it enough to know why it doesn't work or something. Because we've kind of just been ignoring this, and now Ceph Pacific doesn't work, which we found out probably later than we should have. So there's, Victoria from the Manila group has been looking at some CI stuff around this. And I think there's a lot of ways we could build CI jobs to do this, but I'm more just interested in figuring out a plan just to make sure we at least try to do it more than the technical part right now.
Yeah, so I believe Pacific is in RC, but it hasn't actually been released. So the Ceph does one release a year. I don't know what I'm saying. And it's usually beginning of March. So we're coming up on Pacific being out officially. But it's better to test now so we're ready.
Well, we're intending downstream to ship a product that supports Pacific from Wallaby.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking in terms of when we do the changeover. I guess the other thing is, so you had said this probably isn't true. It seems like when Victoria switches to the next version, she puts up a whole bunch of patches, like for DevStack and stuff. So it seems like it's not just a simple, change the name of which package you want to use.
Well, I think it's supposed to be close to that. I mean, there's a Ceph Shaman server that you can query and it'll tell you what repo to get release, whatever from. In my point of view, the issue is more like Octopus was released and none of us even ever looked at it. So even now, I don't think we even know if Octopus works in upstream Cinder master because nobody's bothered to really find out.
So one thing we could do, so if we could run periodic jobs, right? So we're committed to Ceph +2, which means the 2 version that Ceph is supporting right now, plus the 2 older versions. We would probably want to do our CI, the normal Ceph tests with, I don't know, the most recent or whatever everybody else in OpenStack is doing. But we could at least put up a periodic job so that we're not consuming too many resources to run. I think in the periodic jobs by default, I think they just run once a day. So we could, if it's not, so here's my proposal. I don't know how easy this is, right? But if we could configure periodic jobs, I don't know if this would solve the problem about the newest, getting advance notice about bugs that are about to happen in the latest Ceph. But holding that aside, we should probably test with the versions that we claim we support. So I think we should set that up, and then it would be a matter of, I guess, adding a new job when the Ceph release candidate becomes available, which was probably a couple of weeks ago for Pacific, to set up a periodic job that would test against that. Because I don't know if we want to switch over. I guess we'd want to do something like that, right? Because we'd want to get advance notice of breakage, but we wouldn't want to break our CI system on a version of Ceph that wasn't actually released yet.
Right.
But if we have these periodic jobs set up, then it's just a matter of adding another one that uses the release candidate. And then we would at least we'd be running something that would test. Now, of course, people would actually have to pay attention to that and do something, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if the answer is really to try to build all that, or if we just need a checkpoint that says at some point in the cycle, go do a CI run by hand with a manual change and see what happens, or I don't know. We mostly just need something where we don't just like ignore the fact that there's a release that came out. We just don't even.
Well, it seems like around M2 is the time when, and it only happens once a year, which is kind of cool, right? So it would be the spring milestone 2, I believe, is roughly the time where the release candidate for the new Ceph is available. Possibly milestone 1, but so we could add that to the PTL's duties to just bug somebody to actually test this.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good first step.
But I'd like to, if it's just a matter of configuring a job to use that Ceph rather than this one, that would be cool. I don't. All right, so I guess, okay, so that would be cool. What are we going to do about it? Okay, so okay. Anybody here interested in investigating whether it's just a matter of changing a parameter in a job to run our Ceph jobs? I guess that's a good Luigi question. Is he around? All right. Okay. Well, so we can record that we all agree it's important that we get advance notice if we're about to break with the latest Ceph. Your comments about Octopus are a little concerning because theoretically we're going to be supporting what MNOP with Wallaby. All right.
Yeah, and I had a
still think it would be good to. I still think it would be good to have periodic jobs, because Tom Barron had raised this question on a mailing list somewhere, right? Because we put out the statement, we support 4 versions of Ceph with Cinder, and his question was, oh, do you have 4 different CI jobs running each of those versions of Ceph? It was like, no.
Well, we mostly rely on it just not breaking us, which most of the time has been okay.
Right.
So I put up a test patch a while ago to do one test run with Octopus, and it failed because of a bunch of distro dependency issues. And then I got it to pass at one point later. So maybe there's one test run from Octopus last year.
The feedback we got from the that Ceph survey we did was basically that people tend to use the version of Ceph that their distro supplies, and they sort of follow the upgrades of their distro. All right, so the main takeaway here is in the spring we should probably try to do an early test with the Ceph release candidate, just in case there's some kind of major problem that's suddenly going to show up in Wallaby. I mean, I guess the other thing is, right, if we don't catch it in time for the Wallaby official release, right, we can address it in an early stable release.
Sure, the question is just where we want to find out.
Yeah.
I mean, if we don't find it in Cinder upstream gates, somebody in Red Hat QE presumably will find it at some point, probably a good bit later than we could have upstream. But it will get found somewhere eventually.
So, I mean, M2 is the new driver merge deadline. So we would have those reviewed by then. So it would open up a little bit of space to set this up and see what's happening. And we only have to do it in the spring cycle. We don't have to do it in the fall cycle.
Right.
All right. So in terms of Pacific, we're getting advanced bug notices, right, from downstream.
Well, we got one from downstream, which I went and fixed. And in the process of me fixing that one, looking at the test patches that Victoria put up, it's very clear that there's at least one more bug that nobody has yelled about yet, presumably because they were stopped by the first bug that I fixed. So I believe John Bernard is going to go dig into the next bug on Pacific, which is currently, I don't think it's tracked upstream yet. I'll keep an eye out and make sure we have an upstream bug for it by next week if he doesn't end up filing one.
Okay, so all right. So I think at this point, we'll add something to the release cycle timeline to check this. If we're believing that Pacific's being all right, let me leave it at that. So I'm pretty incoherent. Okay. Wow, we're past time. Okay. Eric, you have one more about the excess of the small patches. Is that the?
Yeah. So I was, since the new Garrett interface has a size field, I was looking at this, and there's a whole bunch of super small patches, which presumably anybody could review fairly quickly. And so as far as review backlog, this would probably be a good place to start to knock stuff out. And we'll ignore the fact that there's 5 or 6 from me in there. It's totally not just a personal request. But there's a whole bunch of stuff in there that could probably be easily reviewed. Some of them are actually important fixes. There's also a whole bunch of stuff in there that just needs to be abandoned. That's just noise. So for anybody wanting to do some quickie review cleanup, this would be a good target for it. The kind of other point from this that I was pondering on was, so I have this fix. I just linked an Etherpad here. I submitted this fix that's just Python 2, Python 3 cleanup stuff over a month ago. It's just deletes a few lines of code. I don't really want to wander around on IRC saying, someone please review this patch, which is really not super important. But if I don't, nobody ever looks at it. So I'm not really sure if we can somehow, encourage some reviews of the stuff that's not headlining material like this, because otherwise we just end up with this big pile of small stuff that no one reviews. And I am not really sure. I feel like we could do better than that, but I don't really know what we should be doing differently. So